Hello and welcome to the channel again. This is Sam, still trying to spin to win on Zwift. Today we have another club ladder race and it's going to be another tough one. For me, I did a pretty long and hard 4-hour session outside yesterday. I know outside, it does exist. So my legs are absolutely toast today. Not sure how much I'll be able to contribute to the team, but I'll give it my best as usual. But the bigger issue we face is today's competition. And we're well up against it again.
Déjà vu, right?
Yes, a bit of déjà vu here for me, especially considering the last club ladder race I did. Man, that was a tough one. Some really strong riders there. And today, at least on paper, it doesn't look quite as one-sided as the last week's race did. But for sure, we're up against another really strong team today.
Oh, you can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Yes, I'm afraid so. Today, we're up against the WCC Lizards team. So let's have a quick look at the team comparison. So, yet another club ladder race where we are the underdogs, as the WCC Lizards team are stronger than us in most areas. They have 3 Cat A and 1 Cat A Plus rider, whereas we only have 1 Cat A rider. And again, I am not really a Cat A. Just look at my FTP watts per kilo and you'll see why. They also have a much higher ZRS score and a significantly higher Velo score, which to me is a good indication of how good they are. And on a watts per kilo basis, they are also much stronger on efforts over 1 minute. Although we're pretty even on a short sprint basis. And to single out 2 riders, first, Morgan is very strong and his sprint numbers are, well, wow. And Stefan, their Cat A Plus rider, has a 4.7 watts per kilo FTP. Very impressive. So, there's no denying the fact that this is going to be a tough matchup for us. But I do like a challenge, and you usually get better when you compete against people better than you. At least it helps when I tell myself that.
You're delusional.
Yes, perhaps. Oh well. Today's race takes place on the triple twist course in Watopia. It's around 20 kilometers long, but there's also a 4.5 kilometer lead-in to consider. The course itself is pretty straightforward. The lead-in, while long, is relatively flat. And then we get to the Jarvis common reverse climb. It's not that long, nor that steep, although it does have a few shorter ramps. And it could be a good point to push to force a separation. Then we have a longer, flatter section before the final climb. However, during this part, there are a few smaller bumps along the way, such as the S's, so you need to be on your guard here if the other team do try something. The main climb of the day is the Zwift Com. It is very steep at the start, and then turns into a longer drag towards the Com banner. Again, it is a good place to make an attack, and with only 3 or 4 kilometers to go after the Com banner, and part of that is the descent, if you get a few seconds and you are a strong rider, you may just make the attack stick. After the descent, it's relatively flat before the finish, and I would expect at least some of the riders will battle it out here in a sprint. So this should be a good club ladder race course, I think. Looking forward to it. Let's get into the action.
Let's race.
And the race is a go. But first, one thing. Zwift had a little fun at our expense, it being 1st of April, I think, and all the riders looked like little green dinosaurs. At first it was funny, but then, at least for me, it was really annoying. I couldn't really see that well, and you really had to pay attention to the figures on the right in order to see where you were in the race. I will not miss this one bit in the next race, that's for sure. So our tactics today. We seem to be mainly reacting to what the other teams are doing recently, as they normally have stronger riders. And today was certainly no exception. However, we planned on having a go up the first climb, nothing super fast, but just keeping the pace honest and see what would happen. Then we would try to make a more serious attack on the Zwift com and see whether we could drop any of their riders. However, just in case, we also set up a rotation of who would cover the opposition attacks. Not too much happened in the first 5 kilometers, apart from the pace being really high. There were a few attacks from either team, but nothing really serious. But I was certainly warmed up as we now approached the Jarvis reverse com, as I'd averaged around 300 watts so far. As mentioned, we had intended to keep a high but steady pace up this climb, but the other team had the same idea, so the pace was pretty high from the start. At the first steeper incline, we're doing over 6 watts per kilo, and then the WCC team keep pushing on the flattest section before the next steep bit. Morgan in particular is going pretty hard here, and he has a small gap. I am towards the front, making sure that the gap doesn't get too big, and when we hit the steep bit, I hit a feather power up and smash the pedals pretty hard to make sure we stay in touch. We get to the top, and while I'm able to rest a little bit on the descent, we push reasonably hard on the little incline before the next longer descent. A few riders lose a few seconds here, and in particular Stefan, their Cat A Plus rider. But more on that in a second. Turns out that Stefan did have a dropout, and the other team asks if we can slow down so he can catch up. We discussed this on our Discord chat and agreed that we would keep a steady-ish pace around 2.5 to 3 watts per kilo, and with Stefan being a Cat A Plus rider, he then should be strong enough to catch us up if he wanted to. So that is what we did, and some of the riders on the other team also did pulls at around the 3 watts per kilo mark, so hopefully they thought we were being fair. Sure enough, Stefan did catch back on, and I have to say that was a strong effort, as he must have been doing around 5 watts per kilo for a good while. But again, he is Cat A+, so he probably didn't even break a sweat. We are now approaching the Zwift com. As the pace had not been that high for the last 10 minutes or so, I think we're all relatively rested here, and I knew this could be the deciding point in the race. The start of the climb was hard but steady, at around 5 or 6 watts per kilo, but when we get to the steeper bit, Morgan on the other team puts in a huge attack. He sprints away at over 15 watts per kilo, and while the rest of us are doing 10 watts per kilo, which is not that bad, he leaves us in the dust. I actually felt pretty strong at this point, so I keep pushing once we get over the steep bit, but by this point Morgan is some 10 seconds ahead and still going strong. I keep plugging along though to see if we can cause some separation, and a few riders are falling behind, but 2 of them are my teammates, so I knock off the effort somewhat, and then I just mark the other WCC riders for the rest of the climb. As we get to the com banner, Morgan is still 10 seconds ahead, and there are now 6 of us left in the chasing group. A short skip forward, and we are now approaching the finish of the race. There's still 6 of us in the chasing group, and we thought about sending one of our riders early to make the other team chase, but then we thought we have a reasonable chance in a bunch sprint. At 600 meters, you can see that it is a waiting game, and I have to admit this is where the darn dinosaur models was a real pain in the behind, as it was really hard to see where you were in the bunch. At 500 meters, the pace ups a bit, and I try to get in a good position. And at 300 meters, I start to push a few more watts, and immediately I find myself on the front, so I knock off my effort somewhat. Big mistake, as I lose a bit of momentum here, and I also waste the first couple of seconds of my power up. Then the sprint is fully on, and I must say this was the closest sprint I've ever seen. I actually hit some good numbers for me, but it's not enough to catch the other riders, and I finished last in this little sprint, with 6 of us separated by less than 0.13 seconds. Man, that is close indeed. So in the end, the WCC Lizards won this race fair and square. But I have to say, I'm still happy with our team's performance. In the end, Morgan won, well deserved with that impressive kick on the Zwift com. He actually had some of the best sprint numbers in the race, And my guess is they came on the SwiftCom, as I don't think he needed to sprint in the end. After Morgan, as mentioned, the next 6 riders were separated by a fraction of a second. I don't think I've ever seen a sprint that close. And if you look at the actual sprint figures, well, there were a lot of red numbers here across the board. But congratulations to Håkan, who finished in 2nd place, just ahead of Peter in 3rd place. For me, I came in 7th place, a bit disappointed since I didn't time the sprint well, but pretty happy with my overall numbers. I averaged almost 300 watts for the race, and I had quite a bit left in the tank, I think. So considering I was already quite fatigued going into the race, I think that means I am getting a bit stronger. So I just need to keep plugging on. Now, a few post-race thoughts before we wrap this race vlog up. Alright, post-race thoughts. Woo! Another tough one. Fun race. As I mentioned at the start, the legs were pretty toast going into today. They're more toast now, I can assure you. Although I'm pretty happy with how I rode. I had some pretty good figures, although I got the sprint wrong. More on that in a second. So, race started pretty good pace. We got to the first hill. Both teams went at it pretty hard. And then we started to notice that Stefan on the other team was dropping behind. Didn't think too much of it. And then we got a message from the other team saying it had a dropout and whether we could slow down. So we had a discussion about it. Stefan is their Cat A+ rider, so very, very strong. So we decided that we weren't gonna attack. We're just gonna keep a slowish but steady pace. And if he could time trial his way back, fair enough. And he certainly did. He must have done 5 watts per kilo for a good while there. So a very, very strong rider. But it's only fair, if he's a Cat A+, he gets to sweat a bit in a race like this as well. And also, they had one of their guys on the front pulling a little bit as well. So hopefully we dealt with that one okay. It's a little bit of a tricky one in the middle of a race, to be honest. But anyway, he got back. We get to the second hill, the last hill, and Morgan takes off like a rocket on the other team. I'd have to look at the figures, but he put some serious watts there. I was pushing pretty hard, and I was about to break away, I think. And I think I could have gone a bit of a gap, but not big enough to hold it all the way to the finish like Morgan did. So, laid off the power a bit. And then we stayed as a group pretty much to the end, and we had to just sprint off. And it was quite hard with the dinosaur figures to see where you were. And without even knowing it, I ended up in the front with a couple 100 meters to go. I laid off the power and I was wasting my power up there. And by the time I got going again, they're past me and I just didn't have enough time to catch up. So finished last in that little bunch sprint, but I think all of us were within 0.15 of a second or something. It's like super close, about as close as I've ever seen in a sprint. So congratulations to the WCC Lizards team. Stronger than us, for sure. So a well-deserved win. But I thought we fought pretty hard and a thoroughly enjoyable club ladder race, I would say. All right, that does it for this edition. This is Sam, still trying to spin to win on Zwift. And I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye-bye.